the night of the Grand Harvest Dance in Caldwell, Kansas. Every woman in the territory had curled her hair, pressed her finest dress, and practiced her most charming smile. Because he was going to be there. Cole Danner, the richest cowboy west of the Missouri River. Owner of the Danner Ranch, 12,000 acres of golden land, 3,000 head of cattle, and a name that made bankers stand up straighter when he walked through the door. Every mother in 3 counties had whispered his name to her daughter like a prayer. Every young woman had dreamed about the moment he'd cross the dance floor toward her, extend his hand, and ask for the first dance. That first dance meant everything in Caldwell. It always had. It told the whole town who a man had chosen, who he respected, who he valued, and that night Cole Danner chose. But he didn't walk toward the mayor's daughter. He didn't stop at the banker's niece. He didn't even glance at the rancher's beautiful daughter in the emerald dress who had traveled 40 miles just for this moment. He walked past all of them, and he stopped in front of a girl holding a tray of glasses near the back wall. A girl with flour still dusted on her wrists. A girl nobody had even bothered to learn the name of. The room went dead silent. And what happened next, nobody in Caldwell ever forgot. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. Sending love your way wherever you are. Cole Danner had not always been rich. That was the part people in Caldwell forgot when they talked about him. They talked about the ranch and the cattle and the money, as though he had simply appeared one morning fully formed. Boots polished, pockets full, a legend already written. They forgot the boy who had come to this town 17 years ago with nothing but a busted saddle, a half-dead horse, and $2 sewn into the lining of his coat. He had been 19 then, thin as wire, sunburned nearly black from weeks on the trail. He had ridden into Caldwell at dusk with no plan, no family, no name that meant anything to anybody. He had slept in a stable his first 3 nights. Not because he was allowed to, because nobody noticed him enough to throw him out. He had worked the stockyards for $1 a week. Then he had saved. Then he had bought 1 cow. Then 5. Then 20. He had made decisions that terrified him in the dark and looked like genius in the morning light. He had worked through droughts that cracked the earth open like old leather. He had survived a cattle sickness that wiped out half the ranchers in the county. He had ridden through blizzards that men twice his size refused to enter. And slowly, quietly, like a fire that nobody noticed until it was already enormous, Cole Danner had become the name in Caldwell. By the time he was 36, the Danner Ranch was the most productive operation in all of Kansas. Cattlemen came from Texas and Wyoming just to see how he ran it. Bankers in Kansas City knew his name without introduction. Politicians shook his hand like they were doing him a favor, when everyone in the room knew it was the other way around. But here was the thing about Cole Danner that the gossips and the matchmaking mothers never quite understood. Money had not changed him. It had sharpened him, maybe, quieted him, certainly. But the boy who had slept in a stable, who had eaten dried beans for weeks straight, who had worked for men who never once looked him in the eye, that boy was still alive inside the man. Cole remembered every meal he had gone without. He remembered the specific burn of being invisible, of being useful to people who could not name you. He never forgot what that felt like. And so when the women of Caldwell looked at Cole Danner, they saw a prize. Cole Danner looked back at them and saw something else entirely. He saw performance. He saw calculation dressed up as kindness. He saw smiles that would dissolve the moment his money did. He had watched it happen to other men in this territory. Men who came into wealth late. Men who were courted hard and loved poorly. He had watched those men grow hollow over years. Polite but empty. Housed but alone. Cole had decided long ago that he would rather be alone than be that. He had said no to every introduction, every supper invitation, every carefully arranged coincidence where some eligible woman happened to appear at the exact moment he was passing through town. He was not cruel about it. He was not rude. He simply moved on. The women of Caldwell had mostly accepted this, with varying degrees of heartbreak and indignation. And then the Harvest Dance was announced. The Harvest Dance was the biggest social event of the year in Caldwell. The town hall was decorated with lanterns and dried flowers. The Hartley brothers played fiddle until midnight. People came in from as far as 30 miles out. And this year, for reasons nobody could quite explain, perhaps because the harvest had been so good, perhaps because the weather had turned golden and generous, there was a feeling in the air that something was going to happen. Something was going to shift. The women of Caldwell felt it. They prepared accordingly. Cole Danner received his invitation, folded it in half, and slipped it into his coat pocket without ceremony. He told his ranch hand, a quiet old man named Birch, that he would attend for 1 hour and then come home. Birch had smiled into his coffee cup and said nothing, because Birch knew something that Cole Danner did not yet know about the night that was coming. Her name was Nora Ellis. She had been working at the Caldwell Town Hall for 11 months, hired by Mrs. Hargrove, the woman who organized every civic event in the county with the precision of a military general and the warmth of a fence post. Nora's job was everything Mrs. Hargrove didn't want to think about. She swept the floors before the guests arrived. She ironed the tablecloths. She polished the glasses. She refilled the punch bowl when it ran low. She picked up what fell. She cleaned what spilled. She disappeared into the background of every important event in Caldwell the way wallpaper does, present, necessary, and utterly unnoticed. She was 24 years old. She had come to Caldwell from a small town in Missouri called Bitter Creek. A name that fit, because almost everything about Bitter Creek had been bitter. A father who drank. A mother who worked herself to exhaustion and died before 40. 2 younger brothers she had raised like her own children until they were old enough to find their own way. She had arrived in Caldwell with 1 bag, 2 dresses, and a determination that lived somewhere behind her eyes like a low, steady flame. Not desperate, not fragile, something tougher than both. The kind of determination that doesn't announce itself. The kind that simply continues. She had no illusions about the harvest dance. She knew she would not be dancing. She would be working it. Mrs. Hargrove had made the schedule clear. Nora would arrive 2 hours before doors opened to help set up. She would circulate with trays during the evening. She would stay an hour after the last guest left to begin the cleanup. She would be paid 30 cents for the night. Nora had nodded and asked what time she should arrive. That was Nora. She did not waste energy on what couldn't be changed. On the evening of the dance, she dressed practically. A clean gray dress, her dark hair pinned simply at the back of her neck. She wore the small silver earrings that had been her mother's, the only jewelry she owned, not for the guests, not for the event, simply because they had been her mother's, and wearing them made her feel less alone in large rooms full of strangers. She arrived at the town hall at 4 o'clock. She swept. She ironed. She polished 47 glasses and arranged them on a long table near the east wall. She helped Mrs. Hargrove hang the last of the lanterns, a task that required standing on a ladder in a room that was slowly filling with the golden warmth of candlelight. When the first guests began arriving at 7, Nora took her station near the back with a tray of glasses. She watched the room fill. She watched the women arrive in their beautiful dresses, blues and greens and creams, fabric that rustled when they walked, hair arranged with the kind of careful art that took hours. She watched the men arrive in their good coats, boots cleaned, hats held respectfully in their hands. She watched the Hartley brothers tune their fiddles in the corner, the sound high and bright and already making people smile. She watched Mrs. Hargrove move through the room like a ship under full sail, greeting, directing, approving, and she watched the door. Not for any particular reason she could name, just a habit, maybe. In large rooms, Nora always watched the door. In large rooms, exits mattered. At 7:30, the door opened, and Cole Danner walked in. Nora had heard the name, of course. Everyone in Caldwell had. She had seen him once before at a distance. A tall man crossing the street near the stockyards, moving with the kind of quiet authority that doesn't need to advertise itself. She watched him now the way she watched everything. Carefully, without expression. She noticed that he did not scan the room the way men usually did when they entered a party, that slow, satisfied survey of territory. He simply looked around once, briefly, as though checking that the building was structurally sound, and then moved to the side of the room where he could stand without being immediately surrounded. He was taller than she remembered, broad through the shoulders. His face was weathered in a way that suggested years of outdoor work rather than simply years. His eyes, from across the room, were a shade she couldn't identify at this distance, dark, probably. Serious. 3 women approached him within 4 minutes. Nora counted. It wasn't judgment. It was just observation. Something to notice while she stood with her tray and waited for glasses to need refilling. Cole Danner spoke to each of the 3 women briefly and politely. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He was performing presence without actually being present. Nora recognized that. She had done it herself in harder times. You kept your face smooth and your voice steady, and you were technically there while your actual self waited somewhere quieter and safer inside. She looked away, refilled a glass, moved to the other side of the room. She did not notice him watching her. She had no idea he had been watching her for the past 10 minutes. Cole Danner had noticed Nora Ellis the moment he entered the room. Not the way the other men in the room noticed things. Not the loud, immediate notice of someone cataloging beauty. Something quieter than that. Something almost involuntary, the way you notice a candle in a dark room. Not because it's the biggest light in the space, but because it's real in a way that everything else isn't. She was standing near the back wall with a tray of glasses, and she was watching the room the way Cole watched the room, without performance, without wanting anything from it. Just watching. That alone was remarkable to him. Because every other person in that hall tonight was wanting something. The women wanted to be chosen. The men wanted to impress. The older couples wanted to remember something they were afraid they'd lost. Mrs. Hargrove wanted the event to be perfect. The Hartley brothers wanted to play well. Everyone wanted. This woman at the back with the tray. She seemed to have stepped outside of wanting entirely. She was simply present, doing her work, clear-eyed and quiet. Cole watched her for several minutes from his position along the wall. He noticed the gray dress. Practical, not trying to be anything it wasn't. He noticed the simple way her dark hair was pinned. He noticed the small earrings that caught the lantern light when she turned her head. Tiny flashes of silver. He noticed that when a glass was knocked over by a gesturing guest near the center table. She was there with a cloth before the man had even finished his apology. And she said something that made the man's embarrassed expression relax into a small, grateful smile. He noticed that she never looked toward him. Not once. In a room where nearly every eye found him eventually. Some quickly, some carefully, some pretending not to. She simply never looked. He didn't know if this meant she was unaware of him, or if she simply didn't care. He found, to his great surprise, that he wanted to know which one it was. He endured 20 minutes of social obligation. He spoke to the mayor who had opinions about cattle tariffs. He spoke to a rancher from Dodge City who wanted to discuss breeding programs. He accepted a glass of something sweet that he didn't drink. He smiled at 3 women who were introduced to him by their hopeful mothers and said pleasant, forgettable things that he knew would disappoint everyone involved. And then the Hartley brothers launched into the first real dance tune of the evening. A bright, fast waltz that sent couples spinning onto the floor with a sound like organized joy. The room lit up. The conversation doubled in volume. People moved toward the dance floor. And Cole Danner, for the first time in years, made a decision that he hadn't planned. He set his untouched glass down on a table. He crossed the room. Not toward the mayor's daughter, who was watching him from the left. Not toward the banker's niece in the green dress, who had positioned herself near the punch bowl in what was clearly a strategic location. Not toward any of the women who had been hoping for exactly this moment all evening. He walked toward the back wall. With every step he took, the conversations around him stuttered and dimmed. People noticed. People always noticed Cole Danner in motion because he moved like a man who knew exactly where he was going even on the days he didn't. The women along the walls watched with expressions ranging from confusion to a specific kind of pain they would not admit to later. Nora had her back partially turned. She was arranging empty glasses on her tray, sorting them by size out of habit. A small order imposed on the evening's minor chaos. She heard someone stop behind her. She turned. And for the first time that evening, Cole Danner was close enough that she could see his eyes clearly. They were brown. A very deep, steady brown. The color of good earth after rain. He was looking at her the way nobody at these events ever looked at her. Not past her, toward something more important. Not through her, as though she were furniture. Her. Fully. As though she were the person in the room he had specifically come to find. She felt something shift in her chest. She kept her face still. She had learned to do that. "I believe this is when the first dance begins," Cole Danner said. His voice was low and even. No performance in it. Nora looked at him for a moment. "I'm working," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm asking anyway." The room around them had gone almost completely silent. 47 women in their finest dresses were watching. Nora set her tray carefully on the table beside her. She looked at Cole Danner one more time, not to be coy, not to perform hesitation, but because she was the kind of woman who looked clearly at things before she decided. "One dance," she said, and Cole Danner smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. The whisper moved through the Caldwell town hall the way fire moves through dry grass. Fast, and leaving nothing the same behind it. By the time Cole Danner and Nora Ellis had taken their first steps onto the dance floor, every conversation in the room had stopped. The punch bowl went unattended. The women who had spent weeks preparing for this evening stood absolutely still in their beautiful dresses, watching. Even the Hartley brothers played quieter, as though they too needed to understand what they were witnessing. Because it was not the pairing itself that shocked people. It was the way Cole moved with her. He had danced before. People had seen it at earlier events years back. He was competent technically. He moved a woman through a waltz the way a man handles a task he understands but doesn't particularly feel. This was different. He held Nora's hand like it was something he intended to hold. He kept the distance between them appropriate, respectful, but there was an attention in his posture, a directness in his gaze toward her, that made everyone in the room feel they were watching something private even though they were standing 10 feet away. And Nora danced the way she did everything else. Without performance. Without calculated grace. She simply moved with the music, following his lead. Her face composed and clear, those small silver earrings catching the lantern light with every turn. She did not look around the room. She did not check who was watching. She looked at the middle distance over his shoulder, the way a person does when they're thinking about something true. And Cole looked at her. Margaret Hollis, the mayor's daughter, watched from near the east wall with an expression she would describe later to her diary as dignified indifference, and which was neither of those things. She had worn the blue dress. The blue dress always worked. She had been certain. Clara Reeves, whose father owned the largest dry goods store in 3 counties, stood next to her with a glass of punch she had forgotten to drink. She was trying to understand what she was seeing. She had met Cole Danner twice at formal suppers. He had been pleasant both times. Unreachable in a way she couldn't name, but pleasant. She had thought, perhaps, that given time and proximity, but watching him now, she understood something she hadn't before. He hadn't been unreachable because he was cold. He had been unreachable because none of it had meant anything to him. None of them had made him feel something he needed to lean toward. That girl in the gray dress was doing it. Somehow. Effortlessly. Without even trying. That was the part Clara Reeves couldn't reconcile. The not trying of it. Mrs. Hargrove, standing near the back, watched with an expression that was complicated and very still. She had employed Nora for 11 months. She had given the girl instructions and schedules and barely a second glance. She was trying now to remember specific details about Nora. Her laugh, the things she said, the shape of her personality beyond quiet and reliable and does what she's asked. She found, to her deep discomfort, that she couldn't remember much. At the edge of the room, near the side door, 3 ranch hands who had come to the dance on their night off leaned against the wall and watched Cole Danner with grins they didn't bother to hide. They knew their boss. They had worked for him for years. They had never seen his face look like that. Open. Uncalculated. Like a man who had walked into a room expecting an ordinary evening and found something he'd stopped believing existed. The music swelled. Cole and Nora turned slowly in the space they'd claimed. He said something to her. Too quiet for anyone to hear. She looked up at him then. Really looked at him. For the first time directly. And the steadiness in her eyes didn't waver. She said something back. He laughed. The sound of it moved through the room like a stone through still water. Because Cole Danner, the man they all wanted, the man who smiled politely and meant nothing by it, the man who had kept every door closed for years, had just laughed. A real laugh. Unguarded. Sudden. Like something had surprised it out of him. Margaret Hollis set her glass down and left the room. No one stopped her. The music ended. Cole and Nora stopped. He released her hand slowly, as though reluctant to. The room came back to life. Conversations restarted. Glasses were lifted. The Hartley brothers looked at each other and launched into the next tune. But something had changed. The way air changes before a storm. The way a landscape looks different after lightning has moved through it. Cole Danner stood on the edge of the dance floor, and he did not move toward any of the women watching him. He looked at Nora. "May I bring you something to eat?" he asked. She looked at him. "I'm working," she said again. "You said that before," he said. "It's still true," she said. He nodded. He did not leave. And that was when Mrs. Hargrove, watching from across the room, made a decision of her own. A decision small in itself but enormous in what it would begin. She walked across the room to Nora, leaned close and said quietly, "I'll manage the trays. Take the rest of the evening." Nora stared at her. "Don't make me say it twice," Mrs. Hargrove said, and walked away. Nora stood alone for a moment, her hands suddenly empty without the tray. Cole was still there. "Walk with me?" he said. "There's a porch." She looked at him for a long moment. "All right," she said. The porch ran along the back of the town hall, overlooking a stretch of open land that disappeared into the Kansas dark. The night air was cold and clean. The sound of the fiddles came through the wall, muffled but warm, the way music sounds when you're at just the right distance from it. Not too loud, not lost. There were 2 chairs on the porch. They didn't sit in them. They stood at the railing and looked out at the dark land, and for a moment neither of them said anything. Cole had been on this porch before, years ago, during other events. He had stood here alone, mostly taking air between social obligations. He had always found the dark land more honest than the lit room behind him. "You've been watching this town for a while," he said. 11 months, she said. "And before that?" "Missouri," she said. "Bitter Creek." He nodded. "I've heard of it. Most people haven't," she said. "I grew up knowing places most people haven't heard of," he said. "That doesn't mean they don't leave a mark." She turned to look at him then. That direct look again. He was beginning to understand that this was simply how she looked at things. No angle to it. No coyness. She was a person who looked directly at what she was considering and made up her mind. "Why me?" she asked. It was a plain question. No vanity in it, no performance. A genuine question. She wanted to actually know. He thought about it. He had thought about it in some form for the past 40 minutes. "Because you weren't trying to be noticed," he said. She was quiet for a moment. "That's not much of a reason," she said. "No," he agreed. "It isn't. It's just the honest one." Something shifted slightly in her expression. Not a smile exactly. Something quieter. "People in there are angry," she said. It wasn't a question. "Probably," he said. "Does that concern you?" She thought about it genuinely. "Mrs. Hargrove might have less work for me after this," she said. He looked at her. "Is that your main worry?" "It's a practical worry," she said. "I have practical worries." He nodded slowly. "What would it take to make that particular worry go away?" She looked at him carefully. "That depends what you're offering," she said. "And why?" The directness of it would have rattled most men. Cole found it clarifying. Like the moment the wind drops and you can see exactly where you are. "I'm not offering anything tonight," he said. "I have more sense than that. I'm asking if I can call on you, properly, with all the time that requires." She was quiet. The fiddles played on inside. Something slow now, gentle. I don't have family here to ask permission from, she said. It was not an apology. Just information. Delivered plainly. I know, he said. I'm asking you. She turned back to the dark land for a moment. He waited. He was a patient man. He had learned patience the way most things worth learning are learned, through years of necessity. I should tell you something, she said. All right. I'm not easy to know, she said. I don't mean that as a warning or a test. I just mean it's true. I've been alone long enough that I do things my own way. I say what I think. I don't arrange myself to be comfortable for other people. I noticed, he said. And that doesn't bother you? It's one of 3 things I've liked about you so far. She looked at him. What are the other 2? You cleaned up that spilled drink before the man even finished apologizing, and you made him feel better about it. And you kept your earrings on to work a serving shift. He paused. Those earrings matter to you. She was very still for a moment. They were my mother's, she said quietly. I thought so, he said. Nora Ellis looked out at the dark Kansas land, and something moved across her face. Not pain exactly, but the shadow of it. The kind of shadow pain leaves behind when it's been lived with long enough to become familiar. You notice things, she said. I learned to, he said. You notice things too. Yes, she said. They stood there in the cold air, with the music behind them and the dark land ahead, and for a long moment neither of them said anything. But it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that builds between 2 people who are thinking about the same thing and don't need to rush it. Then the door behind them opened, and everything changed. It was one of the ranch hands, a young man named Dawes, wide-eyed and breathing hard, like he'd run from somewhere. Mr. Danner, he said, you need to come, right now. Cole turned. His face changed. The openness closed, replaced by something controlled and alert. The man who ran 12,000 acres of cattle land. What is it? Riders, Dawes said. 6 of them, at the south gate of the ranch. Birch says they're armed. He says. The young man swallowed. He says he thinks it's the Rook brothers. The name landed on the porch like a dropped stone. Cole was already moving. He stopped at the door and turned back to look at Nora. She was watching him with those clear, steady eyes. Not frightened for herself. Watchful. Go inside, he said. Stay here until morning if you need to. What's the Rook brothers? She asked. He looked at her for one moment. The worst thing that's happened to this county in 10 years, he said. And they've just come to my door. He went. The door closed. Nora stood alone on the porch in the dark, the music still playing softly behind her. The Kansas night enormous and cold ahead. And somewhere in the distance, too far to see but somehow possible to feel, the sound of horses moving fast across dry land. The Rook brothers had a history in Kansas that made older men go quiet when their name came up. 3 brothers, Eli, Samuel, and the youngest, Cade, who had started as cattle thieves in the late 70s and evolved into something considerably worse. They moved through the territory like weather. Unpredictable. Destructive. Gone before anyone could organize a proper response. They had burned 2 ranches in the past year. One in Pratt County, one near the Oklahoma border. Both times they had come at night. Both times the owners had refused to sell land the brothers wanted at the price the brothers offered. Both times the fires had settled the argument. Cole Danner had received a letter 3 weeks ago. An offer on 400 acres of his south pasture. Land that sat above a creek with the cleanest water in the county. The offer had been far below value. The letter had not been signed, but Cole had known. He had not replied. He had told Birch to watch the south gate at night. He had hoped they wouldn't come. He rode hard now, the dance hall disappearing behind him in the dark. Dawes rode hard beside him, and 2 other hands rode behind. The night air cut cold and the horses breathed in heavy plumes. The Danner Ranch south gate was 3 miles from town. When they arrived, they found Birch standing at the gate with his rifle, and the 6 riders stopped in a loose group on the other side of the fence line, their horses moving restlessly under them. They were holding torches. Cole pulled up his horse and looked at the riders. In the center, on a black horse, sat Eli Rook. He was a large man with a flat, expressionless face and the kind of eyes that had seen enough bad things to stop finding them remarkable. He was 40-something. His coat was long and dark and he wore no hat. His gray hair loose to his shoulders. "Mr. Danner," Eli said. His voice was conversational, like they were meeting at a market. "Sorry to pull you away from your party. You're on my fence line," Cole said. His voice was even. "For now," Eli said. He looked around at the land, the dark pasture beyond, the creek catching faint moonlight in the distance. "Beautiful piece of property." "Make your point," Cole said. Eli smiled. It was not a warm smile. "We sent a letter." "I know. You didn't answer." "That was my answer," Cole said. Eli looked at him for a long moment. The torches crackled. One of the horses shifted and Dawes, to Cole's left, tightened his grip on his rifle. "We've had this conversation with other men," Eli said. "It never goes as well as they hope." "I know that too," Cole said. "I know about Pratt County. I know about the Emerson Ranch." He paused. "I know that Judge Calloway in Wichita has been building a case against you for 2 years and is about 6 weeks from having enough." Something flickered in Eli Rook's eyes. Just briefly. "That's a dangerous thing to say to a man with 6 riders at your fence," Eli said. "Maybe," Cole said. "But it changes the math for you. You burn my land tonight, and Calloway has everything he needs. You become men who destroyed a prominent property in front of witnesses while a federal case is already open on you." Cole held the man's gaze. "You're not stupid, Eli. Ruthless, yes. Violent, certainly. But not stupid." Silence. The wind moved through the dark grass. The torches bent and straightened. Then, slowly, almost lazily, Eli Rook raised his hand and gestured to the men on his sides. They began to pull back. Horses turned. 6 weeks, Eli said. He was looking at Cole steadily. "You said 6 weeks. Give or take," Cole said. "A lot can change in 6 weeks," Eli said. "A lot can change in 1 night," Cole said. "And that cuts both ways." Eli Rook looked at him for one more moment. Then he turned his horse and rode. The 6 riders disappeared into the dark with the slow, deliberate pace of men who want you to know they are choosing to leave. Cole sat on his horse and didn't move until the sound of them had completely faded. Birch appeared at his shoulder. "Think they'll come back?" "Yes," Cole said. "But not tonight." "And the 6 weeks?" "I made that up," Cole said quietly. "Calloway's at 4 months minimum." Birch let out a breath. "That was a gamble." "It worked," Cole said. He sat in the dark for another minute, looking out at his land. The grass and the dark creek and the 12,000 acres that he had built from nothing, that he had held through drought and sickness and weather and greed, that he had refused to give up. And then, unexpectedly, quietly, he thought about Nora Ellis, standing on a porch in the cold. Those clear, steady eyes. I'm not easy to know. The small silver earrings catching light. He thought about the way she had looked at him when he'd said he was asking anyway, not swept away by it, not performing gratitude, just looking, deciding, being entirely herself while she decided. He turned his horse toward town. "Watch the gate tonight," he told Birch, "and keep 2 men on the south pasture." "Yes, sir," Birch said. "Where you going?" Cole was already riding. "Back to a conversation I wasn't finished with," he said. When Cole Danner rode back into town, the dance was winding down. Lanterns were being extinguished one by one. The Hartley brothers were packing their fiddles. Couples were stepping out into the cool night, their voices soft, the evening's warmth still wrapped around them. He tied his horse at the post and walked to the town hall. He found Nora on the porch where he had left her. She was still there. She had pulled a shawl around her shoulders against the cold. She was looking out at the dark land with the same composed steadiness with which she seemed to face most things. She heard his boots on the steps and turned. She looked at him for a moment. "Everything all right?" she asked. "For now," he said. She nodded. She didn't press. She understood that some answers were complete. He stood beside her at the railing again, and they looked out at the Kansas dark together. The land he had fought to keep was out there somewhere in the black. His still. For now. I said I wasn't offering anything tonight, he said. You did, she said. I'm going to revise that, he said. She turned to look at him. I'm offering that we have supper, he said. Saturday. In town. In a place where people can see us, so nobody has to whisper about it. He paused. And I'd like to hear about Bitter Creek. And your brothers. And the things that left marks you're still carrying. She was quiet for a moment. That's a lot for a supper, she said. We can use more than one, he said. Something moved across her face. That quiet thing that was almost, but not quite, a smile. The real version of one, held just slightly in reserve. Saturday, she said. He nodded. They stood there for one more moment. Two people who had come from nothing, both of them shaped by hard years into something harder and truer than the polished faces inside that hall. Both of them cautious. Both of them quietly hoping. The last lantern inside went dark. The town of Caldwell settled into its nighttime quiet. Cole Danner had said no to every carefully arranged introduction. Every supper with strategic seating. Every woman who had smiled at his money and called it love. And he had crossed a crowded room for a girl with flour on her wrists and her mother's earrings, who never once tried to be noticed. Nobody in Caldwell ever forgot that night. They talked about it for years. Some people got the story right. Most people added things that weren't there or removed things that were. But the people who were closest to Cole and Nora in the years that followed, the people who watched what they built together quiet and steady as good land, those people knew the simple truth of it. He hadn't chosen her because she was impressive. He had chosen her because she was real. In a world full of performance, she was the first person in a very long time who had not asked him to perform in return. And sometimes that is the rarest and most valuable thing one person can offer another. Not beauty, not status, not perfectly arranged hair in a perfectly chosen dress. Just the willingness to be exactly who you are, and the courage to let someone see it. What would you have done in his place? Tell me in the comments. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who believes in the kind of love that doesn't perform.